Hey everybody, it's Professor Snart here checking in. We are at Thursday afternoon when I'm recording this, so just coming up on our due date, our main due date for unit number 2 right here. So then, as with most units, right, we have that first due date coming up and then the reply part. Again, if enough people get stuff done earlier, right, you might actually be done already or can certainly finish up before Sunday. But there may be this little bit of overlap that then begins to develop between, say, a last unit here and where you want to start work on our next unit. So in Unit 2, we spent some time thinking about what a lot of folks would consider like the most, I don't want to say maybe it's obvious or maybe simple, not quite the right word, but one of the first things that we often think about in terms of a short story is just the plot, like what actually happens. So it's hard to say that we get much out of a story if we don't even know what unfolded. We might be compelled by a character, but if we have no sense of what that person is doing or why, it's hard to enjoy it. So plot is pretty fundamental. It's almost an entry point into understanding some deeper stuff about works. And we read Flight Patterns by Sherman Alexie, and then Where Are You Going, Where Have You Been by Joyce Carol Oates. And we tried to map this pyramid onto those stories. Not so much like did the authors do it correctly, but how did they use those different elements that will happen in short stories and move them around or change the relationship between the pieces by, positioning the different things or the different elements of the story at different points. And again, what's interesting is, first of all, how authors, they don't follow the form, they actually deviate from the theory. That's what makes a story interesting, obviously, or oftentimes. And the other thing that's interesting from our perspective is how, three people could read the same story but come up with very different and often convincing arguments for how that basic pyramid would actually play out if we applied it. So we want to move then from our look at primarily plot into a couple of other equally important aspects of short stories. And really, once it's sort of like an academic exercise to pull these things apart. We never really, in a true reading experience, probably think about these things as totally separate. So to have a plot, we have to have characters doing things. They have to be somewhere, so setting's involved. Often setting can be a way of furthering the plot, or they're deeply related, so it's not like these things are totally separate from one another. So we have a couple more stories to read. Cathedral by Raymond Carver, The Lesson by Toni Cate Bambara, and Araby by James Joyce. I think Araby's the shortest of the group, but probably also the most challenging. And so we have two separate assignments that we're going to do here, but they can, as you'll see, clearly be done, I don't want to say at the same time, but it's not like you have to finish one and then go on to the other ones. And they get at these two aspects that we're focused on for Unit 3, setting and character. So for the setting part of it, we're going to use this tool that we'll return to a couple of times in our course called Padlet. It's nice because, while I think there is maybe an app, I'm not even sure about that. It's a mobile tool meant to be used really on your smartphone, but it doesn't require like a whole lot of an app that eats up your memory or battery or a whole new account that you have to make or anything like that. It really just works in a browser. So the Padlet is embedded here. There's nothing to look at yet because we haven't started doing it. But you're actually going to do it on your cell phone, your smartphone. So open up a browser. For most people it's Chrome or whatever it happens to be. Go to this web address and it should open up this, what I like to think of as a digital corkboard. So the idea of our assignment here, and it's good to think about this now and let it unfold kind of a little more naturally than you might for other kinds of assignments, up until our next due date, where you are using the Padlet or our digital corkboard to be on the lookout in your everyday life. Right? That's why it's a good mobile assignment for settings or certain aspects of settings that maybe they're not exactly like what happens in the story, but they evoke a similar atmosphere for you. So for example, like I say in the discussion or the directions here, Araby is set in turn of 20th century Dublin. So clearly, unless you happen to be in Ireland right now, we're not going to get literally a picture of Dublin, Ireland. So we don't want to be quite so literal about that. The lesson is in New York City. Again, unless you happen to be there, which would be cool. Unlikely to be that literal. Cathedral is just sort of this, New England suburban setting. It's not totally descript, but again, not something that we literally are going to find. Our job, though, is to get a sense of really the atmosphere, the mood that's communicated by the various settings in the story, and then be on the lookout in our everyday lives for little moments, right? Things that you actually run into. You don't seek them out necessarily, but you just happen upon them that, in your opinion, evoke those same kinds of atmospheres or moods. And so what you're going to do then is, if you run into one of those moments, pull out your phone, go to the little Padlet address here, and then when that opens, you can kind of see it over on the side here. Depending on how it works on your phone, there'll either be this little thing you can click to do a post, or you can just double tap on the corkboard somewhere, and it will invite you to, it actually lets you do audio. You can obviously take a picture. You can, I think, record short video. You can add some text to it if you want, but really it's the visual part that we want to capture. And it tends to work pretty well as a mobile thing, so it's not like you have to take the picture and then later sit down at the computer and transfer it from there to the Padlet. It seems to work, in my experience, fairly well, fairly seamlessly. If you have tech issues, you could just take the picture and then do it later, but it really is meant to be a mobile assignment. So do not simply go to your computer and like Google Araby, Dublin, whatever, and then post a picture of Dublin. That's totally not what this is about. This is meant to be something that you're kind of like always thinking about, but even not thinking about. Oh my gosh, did I blow your mind? Okay, probably not. But it's meant to be kind of natural, so you become aware of these settings and the moods that they evoke in your reading of the stories, and then you sort of have to be on the lookout for how you bump into those just in your everyday normal life, and then capture those to the Padlet. We want to capture the visual part. Be sure that your name is attached to it so I can grade it, because we're not building accounts and signing in and all that kind of stuff. So you don't want to just have an anonymous thing and then we have to figure out after the fact whose that is. And while you can do text, I don't expect you to do a whole essay or massive paragraph like explaining why the picture you took connects to a story. You should give us a little sense of it, but you don't need to go to great lengths to explain that. We're actually going to return to this in a later unit, and then we'll have the opportunity to think a little more deeply about how the picture connects back to one of the stories that we've looked at. So the picture, your name for sure we need, and then maybe a little description pointing to like what story this was evoking for you and what aspect of the mood, but you don't need to feel obliged to type a whole bunch of stuff. So make it as natural and mobile as possible. This is not a sit at your computer and do the assignment. Speaking of which, this is a sit at your computer, do the assignment, the other piece of what we're doing in Unit 3 here. So we'll return to our portfolio websites and build a new page. The instructions here walk you through doing that. It's pretty straightforward. And we want to do a character comparison, a fairly conventional exercise, but because we're in the web environment, we want to take it beyond just that, like what I describe here as the essay on the web. We really don't want just a big old block of text, an essay sitting there for us to read. So let's take advantage of where we can, using some of those multimedia features. Maybe there's some visuals we can include. Maybe there's even audio video we could include. Maybe there is ways that we could use organization and layout to help, right, really bring out that idea of comparison that we're trying to build. You're not required to do more than one page, but if you feel like the way that you want to set yours up just lends itself to a grouping of pages, you can totally do that. But as you can guess, what we want to do is compare a couple of characters. We want to compare, find similarities, not contrast, because contrast, we already know they're different. We want to know now from you why these characters are similar, and they should be from different stories. So we're really taking characters that have nothing textually or literally in common and trying to find some similar themes. And you can think broadly. You can think in terms of character traits, kind of the most obvious, but also the arc of the story, like what happens to that character. What kind of a relationship does that character have to other characters, and is that similar across your examples here? So don't just limit your analysis to character traits like, oh, this person is angry and this person is also angry. Okay, that's valid, but is there something a little deeper that we can get to? Be sure to quote directly from each of the stories to support your idea, and then again, try to build this out so it's not just a purely text kind of a thing. Okay, so, notes here about building that page, so just the kind of the technical side, and then making sure that you publish that work. So Google Sites saves all the edits that you make, but it doesn't get pushed out to the web until you click that publish button again. And then, as we've done before, you want to grab the URL to your site, which will now include this new page, post it to the discussion board here so we all have just quick, easy access to the new stuff. And then as the reply component, you want to read a bunch of your classmates' comparison pages and then reply to at least 4. Again, the replies will use the discussion board feature here. We did this before. You'll get into the habit of it if you're not already. Okay, so like I said, 2 separate assignments here helping us to get at both setting and character, and ones that you can, they're not stacked. You can do them both at the same time, but they're very different in flavor, right? This one a little more conventional, the character comparison, where you are at the computer doing that kind of work. And then the Padlet, much more one that you're thinking about really sort of over a series of days and trying to find visual representations of the stories that we've read for this particular unit. Okay, so as always, I hope you enjoy the assignments here, that you're starting to get into the rhythm of the course a little bit, liking the way that we're approaching these stories in a little more creative, hopefully, way than what you're used to. And it'll especially get fun once we've had a few things built into our portfolio and you really start to see it grow as a body of work that you're starting to produce across our whole semester. Be in touch with questions or concerns or anything like that, and I will touch base with everybody soon.